It really is good to be here. I know that there are lots of questions about the topic that I'm going to address, and that is Propositions 1, 2, 3. I expect questions, even pointed ones, and I welcome them. I've been thinking about the future. I teach 2 courses, actually 3 for Northwest Nazarene University, the future of public education, that is as an adjunct professor, using the book Mindset, and another book, The Extreme Future by Dr. James Canton. And those books have helped me think about the future of public education. Canton wrote some headlines that he envisions for the future. Here's one. It's kind of frightening. Future Brave Wave message. You are not authorized to believe in this idea. Please delete all references now. As he looked toward the future, he also came up with this potential headline. Off-world moon condos for sale. Well, as I started thinking about the future, I was an American government teacher, one of my favorite topics to teach, favorite subjects. Here is my headline. Former United States, now balkanized by religion, language, education, and kinship. I will return to that at the end of my comments. My purpose today in speaking to you is to provide some substantive comments about the issue students come first and the law that Mr. Luna propagated. I think in terms like this. We have 285,000 students in Idaho, 17,500 graduates a year, 15,700 teachers. How are we going to operate a school system that benefits everyone? Well, I will tell you this about the law, the 3 propositions. I have very strong feelings about them. Representative Leon Smith, Republican of Twin Falls, said this. This is a mean-spirited bill. It bashes teachers, and to me is not a good direction to go. It turns teachers into pawns, powerless pawns of the political system. A little bit about my background, so you understand my passion about public education. I grew up in a very conservative religious family. I went to a private school, Northwest Nazarene College, now university. In the 60s, when President Kennedy, or soon to be President Kennedy, was running, a very influential parishioner in my denomination talked to me about the evils of Catholics. They had machine guns in the basements. They were ready to overthrow this country. Now, why did I not subscribe to that? I was in Coquille High School. You may have heard of Coquille Red Devils. They're world famous. Well, I guess not this part of the world. Why did I not believe this man? I was interacting with students from all manner of religions and denominations, including one very pretty Catholic girl. And that humanized what could have been a stereotype for me. It was a seminal moment in my life as I have thought back on the role of public education. I learned the value of all students, and it is also a reflection of my attitude about Rotary, with its embracing of the world in all religions and all manner of people. It came from my early background. I want to give you a little overview of the law with this context. Idaho has placed second to last in the nation for per pupil funding for several years. In addition, a recent report indicated Idaho had the 4th largest percentage drop in per pupil funding, 19% over 5 budget cycles beginning in 2008, adjusted for inflation. Last year, $14.7 million was diverted from local districts to the state to begin funding these initiatives. That amount is $60 million in 2012-13. The projected cost of the technology-related items for the years 2012 through 17 is 133.8 million. Correction. As of this morning, we learned that it is 180 million for the next 8 years. Jerry Evans, one of the most competent superintendents of public instruction in my time, and I go clear back, as you know, to the 60s, to D.F. Ingle King and Roy Truby. And Jerry Evans, Republican superintendent of public instruction, was well regarded by all of those in the education community. He wrote an editorial recently, I'm quoting from it. These reforms hold little promise of helping students attain higher academic performance, which ought to be the real goal of any school improvement program. They are nothing more than efforts to reduce local control and divert the public's attention away from a severely underfunded public school system, with the notion that with less money and more technology, we can have better outcomes. This is a man that I truly respect. I want to talk about Proposition 1. As you know, there are 3. Proposition 1 is probably the most controversial for many people. It limits professional negotiations, which started in the early 70s. As a young teacher in Nampa, I was a part of that effort. And those negotiations occur between school boards and associations. It limits it to a discussion of salary and fringe benefits only. One is prohibited from discussing at the negotiations table class size or anything else other than salary and fringe benefits. It also eliminates fact-finding in professional negotiations. It phases out individual contracts and renewable contracts. Now I want to make a distinction. You've heard about tenure. I've heard it all my professional life about tenure. Tenure is that element in education law where you cannot fire a teacher. You cannot do it. That's also a myth. The real phrase is continuing contract. The Boise School District has taken a position against all 3 propositions. They said thus: we believe strongly in local control, and we believe that how a school board negotiates with its teachers is best left up to the local direction. Now, there is an ad playing by the proponents of this proposition featuring Bob Shannon, who was the National Counsel for the National Education Association, a gentleman that I've heard speak a number of times. And you know that if you've seen that ad, they are featuring a portion of Mr. Shannon's retirement speech in 2009. I underscore that, a portion. And I think, as I look at all political ads, our creed, is it the truth? Is it the truth? Is it the truth? And I don't care if those ads come from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, Independent Party. We need to ask, is it the truth? I'm going to give a more complete excerpt of what Bob Shannon said at his retirement speech. That the NEA will remain a target as long as we continue to be effective advocates for public education, for education employees, and for human and civil rights. And that brings me to my final and most important point, which is why, at least in my opinion, NEA and its affiliates are such effective advocates. Continuing the quote, despite what some among us would like to believe, it is not because of our creative ideas, it is not because of the merit of our positions, it is not because we care about children, and it is not because we have a vision of a great public school for every child. NEA and its affiliates are effective advocates because we have power. And we have power because there are more than 3.2 million people who are willing to pay us hundreds of millions of dollars in dues each year because they believe we are the union that can most effectively represent them. The unions that can protect their rights and advance their interest as education employees. There's the entire quote. Now, I know I'm in Twin Falls, a very conservative area, and unions are not popular. In fact, using a tongue-in-cheek, Jill, with my permission, called me a union thug. Well, you know me quite well. I don't think I'm very thuggish. What's wrong with quoting someone out of context? Remember the four-way test? Is it the truth? Is it the truth? Well, I've been thinking about the, quote, thugs that I've known. Who is this union and these thugs? Is it Penny Sear, the president of the Idaho Education Association, a librarian serving as president? Or is it Mary Lou Berry, honorable teacher in the Twin Falls district? My children went to school in the Twin Falls district. She is a wonderful teacher. Is it Ted Hadley in Twin Falls, the director of music? He's an association member. Maybe it is Sherry Wood, a graduate from Marsing. If you recall the introduction, you know that I taught in Marsing. She was one of my students. Years later, she became president of the Idaho Education Association. I worked with her. Is she a thug? Not at all. Well, then, maybe it's Jerry Helgeson, my close friend, who is an Idaho Teacher of the Year, who's also serving in his retirement years as executive director of the Idaho Academic Decathlon. Milton Barris. I hope you get my point. These are your friends and family members and neighbors in your local towns seeking to advance the cause of education and of educators. It is easy to stereotype them. Now, in my career, those 40 years, I've worked on a number of education reform issues as a staff member of the Idaho Education Association. You may recall that The Nation at Risk came out in the early 80s, and IEA worked with the state legislature on a bill called the Idaho School Improvement Act. In the 1990s, IEA published a document called Visions of Change, outlining what workplace changes needed to be completed for student progress. In 1997, the IEA worked with the legislature to create the charter school law. In the late 90s, we also worked together to establish Idaho's MOST program, Maximizing Opportunities for Students and Teachers. And I personally worked in school districts on formative assistance and summative evaluation and site-based decision-making. The point here is that as a staff member and as a teacher, as curriculum director for South Junior High in Nampa, I worked on improving education for children. So I ask you not to be subject to or embrace the stereotypes that the other side is presenting about what this organization does. It's an ideal and noble organization trying to do good work in difficult circumstances. Proposition 2 provides teacher performance pay on state-mandated test scores, student performance in hard-to-fill positions. Now here is a troubling thing about this. New York's $75 million experiment with pay for performance did not increase student achievement at all. If anything, it declined according to Harvard economist Roland Fryer. But this is the type of proposal where we can all be idealistic. Sure, we should all be paid based on our performance. All of us. If we're good, we're paid. If we're not, we're fired. Well, life isn't quite that black and white. Dan Popke, the political writer for the Idaho Statesman, wrote, "Researchers have struggled because pay-for-performance programs often don't outlast the study, tending to be funded in years of surplus only to fade away." Here's something to consider. Not one of the highest performing nations in our world have accountability-based systems that link student test performance to teacher pay. Not one. Here are the weeds of this proposal. Bob, let's say that you are in a school that has, you're teacher of the year in that school. You're a great teacher, wonderful teacher. Scott, you're a second-year teacher, you have very tenuous evaluations by your principal, job might be on the line, you don't know, but your school is getting paid for performance. Jill, who was last year's Teacher of the Year, in fact was a candidate for State Teacher of the Year and National Teacher of the Year, is in another school that didn't quite make it. She doesn't get any bonus. Here's what teachers are telling me. At Centennial High School, I'm getting a bonus. Why? Because of the work of 9th grade teachers. I've not even taught those students, but I'm getting a bonus. Something's terribly wrong with that situation. Let's go to Proposition 3, the laptop proposition. I'm a member of Phi Delta Kappa educational organization. We talked about technology, studied it, the future of education. No one is saying we don't want technology in the classroom, but you cannot hug a hologram. Think about that. You can't hug a hologram. I'm a mentor to a little 4th grade a student at Taft Elementary as part of my Rotary responsibilities. The bad thing about that is that 4th grader can outrun me, and he likes to play tag a lot. Well, I think about Bradley and the relationship he has with his teacher, Mrs. Rose. The other day I walked in Friday's noontime lunch, had my chocolate milk. We went out to the playground. Suddenly Bradley was called back in, and you should have seen Mrs. Rose. Bradley? And she was wagging her finger. You were supposed to be in here doing your spelling. Well, if he weren't intimidated, I was. And I thought, he's learning something here. This is a teacher who loves this child. You cannot hug a hologram. During the deepest recession since the Great Depression, Idaho has started a new entitlement program, which provides a new laptop to every high school teacher and student in the state, whether they need one or not, whether their parents want one or not. Students and teachers now use clickers, smartboard technology, lab probes, high-tech calculators, and computers as part of their daily routine. I have not found a teacher who says, I don't want technology. But the imposition of technology and the manner in which it was completed without consulting the stakeholders is the real problem. Class sizes in Twin Falls. Wiley, I'm going to quote from you, from a Times News article. This year, Dobbs said that class sizes are a result of less state funding for employee salaries and benefits. The state shifted 1.6% of those funds to pay for the Students Come First education reforms. Dobbs said there haven't been any layoffs in the school district during the economic downturn, but some job positions have been left vacant. With fewer employees and about 350 more students this year, that has led to some larger class sizes. Now, Wiley also said it's not the case across the board. I want to be fair about that. People allow their egos to shade their perceptions of reality. I don't, but other people do. We are seeing this right now in the presidential race and in the wider political sphere, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. I saw that in the imposition of the Luna laws, and I saw that in the imposition of the Obamacare laws. People will resist change if they do not clearly see the benefits. About half of our country see the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. Half do not. There is resistance. Likewise, we are seeing great resistance by parents of students and teachers to the Luna laws because people do not see the benefits of marching in this parade with Luna, who may be too far ahead of it. I want to read a letter from a Garden City teacher who moved to Idaho from San Antonio, Texas. Our school district won an enormous grant from Apple, which provided every high school student with a laptop, charger, and specialized backpack in which to carry them. The program was an utter disaster. Students mistreated their laptops, came to class with them uncharged. If they remembered to bring their charger, the classroom was crisscrossed with cords, making it difficult to walk around the room. Backpacks were destroyed and laptops were broken, lost, stolen, and pawned. When computers malfunctioned, students were left stranded, unable to access any work they had completed. Some students' families could not afford internet service at home, so they were unable to complete homework assignments. When computers malfunctioned, there was often little we could do because the staff member responsible for maintaining the laptops was completely overwhelmed and unable to keep up with demand. But the worst outcome was that students continually accessed inappropriate websites, both at home and at school. And it wasn't only our students. Other family members would use the laptops for their personal use. Pornography was rife. Anyone who thinks a firewall will prevent students from visiting prohibited sites is kidding themselves. I once walked into a classroom with a graphic pornographic image displayed on the wall using a projector. The teacher was almost in tears. This is not the kind of classroom environment we want for our students. Will that happen in Idaho? I don't know. It happened elsewhere, so we need to be aware of it and informed about it. I want to conclude this way. After 40 years in public education, full-time, and now 5 years in retirement, here are some of my conclusions. Teachers cannot be blamed for our school's current challenges. In fact, teachers are liked and trusted, frankly, much more than Mr. Luna or the legislature. Idaho teachers have a 70% favorability rating, whereas the legislature has a 56 unfavorability rating, 56%, with only 33% favorable. When asked whom they blame for problems facing schools and public ed, people say elected leaders for failing to fund our schools. A truism. The effort to reform education has been part of my educational life since I stepped into the classroom in 1967. I've been subjected to educational fads, usually imposed from the top down, and this certainly is one, from well-meaning people, I don't question that, who were enamored with the fads and ignored the trends. The reform efforts I have experienced tend to gravitate toward fads. Now, I enjoy idealists. I consider myself one. These persons who believe they have a relatively straightforward way to solve problems. At the same time, after 67 years of life, right in that time, I choose to remain cautious about such idealists on the left or the right. I am a true conservative in that regard. As John Naisbitt writes in his book, Mindsets, while many things change, most things remain constant. He also wrote, resistance to change fails if benefits are not real. I gave a little anecdote about my life in telling you what I learned about Catholics and how I learned that was wrong. You may recall the headline that I wrote. It reveals my background. I'll read it again. If I can find it again, I will read it. Here we go. Here is my headline. And I wrote it because I am personally fearful that the trend we are seeing toward privatizing the public good is dangerous for us. Former United States now balkanized by religion, language, education, and kinship. I look upon public education as our great national treasure. We must protect that treasure. We must improve it, but we must protect it. Thus, I'm asking you to consider your position with regards to Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much.
If we have any questions, we can welcome those now for Terry.
There will be a short multiple choice quiz.
Was that a question? Tony has a question.
I have a question regarding the laptops. You mentioned the parent comment, the editorial comment. I heard also, as part of the support for the laptops, is there a school district in Nampa that's using these quite successfully? Why do they need?
I'm not aware that there is a school in Nampa. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just not aware of it, that every student has a laptop. I'm just not aware of it.
Well, I just recall that conversation from Luna that they patterned it after a successful trial period in Nampa School District, and I didn't.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. I'll do some research on that to see. Anyone else?